Hello and welcome back at long last to another F1 Fantasy video. It's been absolutely ages because we had this mini summer break and then I foolishly gave myself food poisoning for the second time in the last 8 or 9 months. So yeah, it's been a fantastic week for me where I've literally been writhing around complaining about my belly. So I'm finally feeling pretty well today, so it's about time I got back onto the YouTube choo-choo train and gave you some final thoughts ahead of the race around Spa this weekend. As you can see on screen, we've got the results from the sprint quali, which is the last bit of information we're really going to get going into the deadline. So I'll have a little look at the results here, think about what that might mean. Have a quick look at the practice debrief from the F1 website. Again, take it with a pinch of salt. Those simulations aren't always particularly accurate, but we'll see what they say anyway, because I think it's good to look at. And then we'll have a quick think about my actual team and how that might affect your team, blah, 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 blah. You know the drill by now as we're halfway through the season at this point. So let's get stuck in to what happened in sprint quali. Lo and behold, the McLarens are really fast still, and they might have even got fast around this track. It is the longest circuit in the calendar. So maybe there's more opportunity for the McLarens to show their strengths, particularly for that middle sector. They looked extremely, extremely quick. The higher downforce areas, and they didn't really lose too much in the straights as well, as far as I can see. So the McLarens look phenomenal, and there will be some people that are definitely considering the triple up on McLaren, drop into maybe a Sauber or a Haas if you can afford it, that sort of thing. Going for the 3 times DRS on Piastri and 2 times on Norris, or vice versa. Probably advise it on Piastri the way he's driving at the moment. I'm personally probably not looking to go down that way. I'm quite happy to hold the 3 times DRS until later on in the season. That said, it does look great. McLarens do look good. It does look like there's likely to be some rain affecting the Grand Prix on Sunday, so that's something to take into account. Bit scary. But yeah, I think if you want to go for it, I think it's still fine. Like I say, there's risk involved with the rain, but the 3 times DRS looks good because the McLarens look good in practice. They've looked obviously very good, as you can see on screen, with where they've finished in the sprint quali. And if you do go for the 3 times DRS, I will say it's probably quite a big differential this weekend. People would have, the more casual manager probably would have blown it earlier on in the season. The more patient manager, like myself, is probably going to use it further down the season. So right now could be a good window where you're going to get a nice little jump on people. That said, to use it, you got to drop someone like a Ferrari or Mercedes, whoever is in that second slot, down to someone like a B tier constructor like a Sauber or an Aston Martin or a Haas, something in that region, and you are going to very likely lose out on points in that second constructor slot. So yes, you'll be making nice gains with the McLarens, but you will probably suffer for it by picking a B tier constructor. So that's where I'm at with the 3 times anyway. So yeah, to summarize, the McLarens are quick. Verstappen, as always, is quick around here as well. 4 tenths off from, scroll up so you can see that, 4 tenths off from the pole here. So it's actually pretty good effort considering that their Red Bull car is pretty horrendous, although they have had some upgrades, I believe, just on Max's car, not Tsunoda's. Poor old Yuki, still struggling down there in P12. But yeah, so I think Red Bull, for the fact that Tsunoda's struggling so much, Red Bull's just completely off the menu. That second constructor slot in the A tier is literally Ferrari versus Mercedes, and I think looking where Ferraris are, Charles Leclerc is in a good position to hold 4th position. Maybe gets lucky and moves up a position, but probably not. He probably just holds it, to be honest. There's no real threat from behind, and then he's probably not going to challenge the guys ahead, so he's probably going to hold that. So that's what, 8, 7, 6, 5 points for Leclerc just in the bag, pretty much. And then you've got Lewis Hamilton, who's qualified way back, was very upset in the interview post-quali. Understandably, he's frustrated. Things are not going the way he wants them to go in Ferrari. And however, it does look pretty good for fantasy managers that are backing Hamilton and indeed Ferrari. I've got Ferrari as my second constructor, and I'm likely to keep it that way for at least this week. Partly because Lewis Hamilton's back here. I think even if Hamilton qualified in top 10, I think I'd still be looking to keep Ferrari. But the fact he's back here means very likely, although the sprint race is obviously a lot shorter, like a third of the length of a Grand Prix, there's still ample time for Hamilton to make overtakes and get up to comfortably, should be getting up to 13, 12, 11 maybe. That said, wouldn't be overly surprised if he just randomly struggles. But the Ferrari itself, it looks like their suspension upgrade, much hyped up, is working, but obviously nowhere near to the extent that they needed to get anywhere close to McLaren. So it's still promising for the Ferraris. I think they're a good hold this week for people like myself that have got them anyway, before we look to potentially maybe next week move on to the Mercedes double A tier build. an Antonelli or a Russell, whatever. But I think it could be another week or two holding the Ferraris for me personally. And I think Hamilton being back here is just great because, I mean, there's a little bit of a threat from Antonelli, but otherwise he's just likely to be moving upwards. Likely, but this is Ferrari and this is Hamilton in 2025, so who knows what's actually going to happen. Mercedes are interesting as well because they are quite far back and they should also make some nice gains. Russell in P13, Antonelli right at the back, so yeah, definitely some good opportunity for Mercedes to climb as well, so that is slightly appealing, I guess. And you've got to think about budget as well. I think Mercedes are likely to gain at least 0.1. They need, I think, 66 points to get up to 0.3 rise, so whereas Ferrari, I think, need like a -1 or something. So it's pretty easy Ferraris to get a nice rise. And Mercedes, you're going to kind of be gritting your teeth a little bit of whether they're going to reach that or not. Sprint weekend obviously makes it easier, and they're in a good position to get some positions gained and overtake. So they're in a good position to start, but I would still probably be back in the Ferraris this week. Past that, very surprised, not very surprised actually, to be honest. The Hazards have been pretty decent all season. They have been for a little while now. But yeah, very strong performance from Ocon and Behrman. Ocon, particularly in the interview after qualifying, was saying he's very positive, saying the car felt great. They've had these upgrades in Silverstone and it's just, yeah, things are looking great. So I've currently got Ocon in my team. There is some talk about moving Ocon down to someone else. You know, for me personally, I don't have Behrman, and Behrman's more likely to gain value, so it could be a case of me swapping down Ocon to Behrman, but I actually kind of like Ocon this weekend because of the potential wet race potential, and that means, you know, if I swap him down to Behrman, we've seen the rookies this year haven't been great in the wet, and I trust Ocon a bit more. So that said, Ocon, you know, starting in P5, he's not really likely to get up. He's never really going to challenge Leclerc, Norris, and beyond. So again, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 points. If he finishes where he starts, he gets 4 points. But if he just like loses one position to a Sainz, for example, which is very possible, then, you know, he goes from 4. He drops a place, so he gets -1, so it's 3, and then he loses a point for the position lost, and suddenly he's only on 2 points, and suddenly it's really not looking that great. And then, you know, if he loses one more position, then it's just like basically a 0-pointer. So it's not really too exciting, even though he is starting in 5th position. But I think the fact that he's very confident and happy and the Has looks pretty decent means he's still a fine hold for this week, because he's still got a good chance of going up in price, even not spectacular. It's going to be a bit more of a struggle for him in the following race when his big score drops off from the previous race in wherever it was, Austria or whatever it was. I can't remember. It's been so long since we've had any races. But yeah, so Ocon, I think he's fine to hold this week, and I have him in my team, so I may well be holding him, but he's also slightly on the chopping block. Past that, probably not much more to say. The other B tiers down here, in what kind of position you'd expect them to. Bortoletto is capable of maybe squeezing a point, but I don't know. It's a weird little top 10 here. Bortoletto, Hadjar, Gasly, Behrman, Sainz, Ocon, having all these big hitters, Russell, Hamilton, etc., out the top 10 has made it kind of spicy up the top here. But yeah, let's move on. Have a look at the simulations. So again, I will say, don't necessarily have to pay too close attention to what goes on here, because they're not always particularly accurate, but they're still like a nice little indicator anyway. And I'm still, at the time of recording, waiting for F1 Fancy Tools to put any sort of simulation out other than the early simulation, so I can't really use that at the moment. So I'm just gonna have a quick look, and yeah, guess what, McLaren's are absolutely miles ahead in simulation pace on qualifying. It's kind of what you expect. The Ferraris, it's kind of pretty much how people qualified, other than Mercedes, but the Mercedes did have a couple of mistakes, a bit of damage to the car, that sort of thing. So I think Mercedes will come back certainly stronger over the next couple of days. Otherwise, there's not much to say about it, because all these teams back here are just super tight, and it's not really much worth looking at. We scroll down to the race pace. It's a pretty similar story. No one really moves around too much at all. I think, yeah, the Ferraris do actually drop down to replaced by Mercedes. And Mercedes race pace is apparently better, but I also wouldn't rule out the Ferraris being, you know, fine. And like I say, these simulations are not always that accurate, so I'm still kind of happy to just hold Ferraris, even though it's not overly exciting. The important thing is they've got a very clear gap, like half a second gap here on the simulation to everyone else, so I think they're still a pretty secure bet for both the sprint and the Grand Prix. Like I said, it might rain on Sunday, looking like a decent chance that there will be rain affected as of the time of recording this on Friday evening. Will that affect the Ferraris? Will that help the Mercedes? Cooler conditions with the rain and that sort of thing? Quite possibly. It was a complete mess in Silverstone for everyone, so it's kind of hard to pick up too much from what happened in Silverstone in terms of the rain and everything and the cooler conditions. But Hamilton still managed to get a good result in Silverstone. Not quite the podium, but yeah, Leclerc certainly struggled, so that's I guess some food for thought as to will Leclerc actually struggle again if it pours a rain this weekend. I don't know, but yep, those are the simulations. So let's have a look at the team and F1 Fantasy Tools budget builder. So we jump over to the teams. I'm not going to pay any attention to team 3. It's like 100k, but we'll pay close attention to team 1 and team 2. So team 1 is sat at about 1600 global. Team 2, small tiny drop last week down to I think P19 now. So still very strong and looking to maintain that position as long as possible. Like I say, I'm not going to be able to afford that double A tier constructor anytime soon with this, so I might start falling away a little bit in the next few races. But for the time being, keeping more or less with the template with its reduced budget and hoping to kind of maybe at least once get into the top 10 this season would be nice. Being close, but not quite there. So it'd be nice on sprint weekend if I get a bit of luck. Maybe I can squeeze into top 10 for a week or two. It'd be nice. So I will be having to think about that as well as my team 1. We're going to focus on team 1 though, because that's kind of where my main thoughts are at the moment. 2.2 million in the bank. This is where I've come out of Silverstone, which, by the way, a quick comment on the Silverstone points changes. Like, what the hell was going on there? There's so many things wrong with that, but at least we got the right results in the end. The first thoughts I had were like, what if this was like Abu Dhabi, last race of the season? What happens if they change the scores like 2 weeks later after Abu Dhabi? Someone that thinks they've won the game then loses their first prize. That was my first thought. That'd be awful for that person. And then what happens also if it was like a head-to-head, double header or a triple header, and again you wait like 2 weeks and it's like another 2 races in the middle of that, and you still going to change the scores from like 2 races ago? Don't know. It's all a bit of a mess, but at least we got there in the end. So anyway, in case you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's because F1 Fantasy developer gods decided to change the overtake points 2 weeks after Silverstone. So there you go. Fun times with the developers as always. And now we look at my actual team. Now I've finished my kind of routine grumble about the game. But yeah, what am I thinking about this team? I'm thinking there's definitely a potential to just leave it as it is. However, I do think Bortoleto is likely to drop in price. He did get that DNF last time out, so he's on the chopping block. I'd love to just go to Behrman, but I am 0.4 short of just dropping in Behrman. If you can afford this team on screen with Behrman in here, then I think it's just easy peasy pickings. You could. My only real option is potentially dropping an Alonso, potentially to get Behrman in, but then only leaves me at 5.9. So I'm stuck with either keeping Bortoleto or dropping down to one of the other, one of the 4.5 million, so Lawson or Colapinto. I kind of don't hate Colapinto. That said, I have already talked about the fact that it's a potentially wet race on Sunday, and I don't have any real trust in Colapinto. He's kind of a DNF waiting to happen. I don't really trust him, but he is pretty consistent at qualifying really far back. So he could make up a couple of positions gained if other people DNF and he lucks his way through the race. And he can't drop in price. This is the kind of the main thing, as we're all trying to jump to these double A tier, Mercedes, McLaren alongside like a Russell and Piastri or whatever over the next couple of weeks perhaps. Colapinto is one of those people that are kind of safe, and if we look at the budget, actually Colapinto, he's never going to get a price rise, but he's at 4.5, so he's safe. Bortoleto, he needs 9 points to avoid the price drop, so it's doable, particularly on a sprint weekend. It's definitely doable, but it's also still potentially quite difficult, so I'm not entirely convinced by holding Bortoleto. Like I said, I can't do a straight swap to Behrman, which is unfortunate because Behrman looks like a nice deal here to just a -1 required to get a price rise. So I really do like the look of Behrman, and the only way I can really get him in is it's basically dropping Fernando Alonso, or I could drop Ocon down to him, but I've already touched on earlier in the video, I quite like Ocon this weekend. He looks really confident, the hat looks good, and with a wet race, Ocon's historically pretty decent in the wet, so I don't mind holding him for that reason as well. Also, I kind of like Alonso, so maybe Behrman's too much of a luxury because I can't get to him. Maybe I need to just cut my losses and accept that I need to move to someone else. But who else do I go to? Like Carlos Sainz? Nah, he's going to drop in price for the next couple of weeks. His last couple of scores are -20 and -1. And as well, the Williams have had all sorts of engine issues recently, lots of reliability issues, all sorts going on. Even today, Albon was complaining about an engine issue which affected his qualifying. So I just don't want to touch the Williams at the moment. So Sainz is off the menu. Gasly, every time I pick him, it just doesn't work out. I just don't want to go kind of near him. He only needs 7 points, admittedly, for a price rise. And he's in, I don't know, he could potentially hold position where he qualified. I think he was like P9 or something. But it's not it's not looking great to get 7 points. So I don't know. Gasly's a potential, but I don't really like it. And then past that, Hajar's going to drop in price. So then you're really just looking at Lawson, who qualified in P11, I think. Again, not a great position to be qualifying in, but sounds quite confident in terms of the car. He is at 4.5, so he's another safety net. He's got this -18 pointer that's going to be taken into account for the next couple of weeks. So he's just going to sit at 4.5 million for the next couple of weeks. So you're only really picking him for the safety net and potential for points. Who's more likely to avoid DNF? Basically, Lawson versus Colapinto. They're both very susceptible to it. So I don't know, maybe just pick Colapinto because he starts way further back than Lawson in the sprint. I don't know. I just don't feel confident with Colapinto at all, and as well as the fact he might just get ejected from the seat any given moment. I wouldn't be surprised if Flavio Briatore is actually installed in an ejector seat just like halfway around Spa. It's like boom, and he just flies out, parachutes down to the base of Eau Rouge. But yeah, anyway, jokes aside, I'm still undecided. I think we'll have to, I don't know, sleep on it and decide in the morning, because I want Behrman, but I just don't know if I can really get him. Like Alonso has been great for several weeks, and Alonso is getting a little bit more tougher to get in, but I think I kind of trust him again in the wet to get 7 points, or at least 2 points to go up in price. So I kind of don't want to get rid of Alonso, and I definitely don't want to get rid of Hulkenberg. So it's either, if I really want Behrman, it's going to have to be Ocon. And maybe it's a fine move because it's like a more longer term move anyway. Because again, if we flick back to the F1 Fantasy Tools, look at Behrman's scores the last couple of weeks, 14 and 14. He's a little bit cheaper as well, which helps his points per million threshold. Ocon 8.9, and then once his 20 pointer drops off after this weekend, he's looking at a 4 plus whatever he scores this weekend. So it's going to be a lot harder for him going forward. So maybe it's just, cut the losses on Ocon, even though I do quite like him this weekend, put Behrman in. That gives me 8.5, then I can get to Stroll. And, Stroll as well is right up here. He's looking likely. He only needs a 0 pointer for the max rise. So it might just be sensible to just put Ocon on the sidelines this weekend, even though I think he's a potentially good pick, because I can scrape this. And it is literally scraping it with every penny, every cent, every dollar, whatever you want to say. I do quite like this team. I have to say I do like the team. I just kind of like Ocon. But like I said earlier on as well, he might end up with like a 1 or 2 pointer, even though he looks in a great position. It might not be that great if Sainz overtakes him or whatever. So yeah, this could well be where I end up. I have already touched on earlier on the video about the triple McLaren situation, and I could definitely go for it if we just skip some people out and we go down to a Sauber, for example, put Norris in here, and then 6.8. Put kind of whoever you want in there, really. I guess I've gone the wrong way. Again, you're probably looking at something like a Gasly or whoever. It doesn't really matter. Put whoever you want, whoever you can afford the budget. My point is that the purpose of this is to get this triple McLaren so you can 3 times and 2 times. I think it's fine. And like I said earlier in the video, I think it's a nice differential this week. I don't think a lot of people will be going for the 3 times, particularly because of the threat of rain. And also for me on a sprint weekend, points are everything on a sprint weekend. I'm not that bothered about budget, although obviously it's a big concern still. But in terms of that second constructor slot, I just do not see the Saubers scoring big. And yes, they keep surprising us. They keep scoring big somehow, but their luck's going to run out eventually. They're going to get what they are expected, which is like 20 points or whatever in a week very soon, if not this weekend now. And then everyone else who's sat on a Ferrari or Mercedes or whatever is just going to be laughing because they've scored like 60, 70, 80 points. And it's a huge, huge gap. And when we're already like 200 or 300 or whatever it is points behind the leaders at this stage of the season, we're into the last half of the season now. So we certainly need to be considering points, and sprint weekends in particular. We need to think about points. So I don't really like going small with the second constructor on a sprint weekend, even though it enables this big 3 times opportunity of Piastri and Norris. I think there's not going to be a great deal of development as the season goes on now. Everyone's going to be turning the focus to 2026. McLaren's are just going to be the quickest car for the rest of the season. And there'll still be great 3 times and 2 times options later on in other sprints where we don't have to compromise our team so much. So I'm happy to just kind of leave it as it is for now, not go down that road. In terms of my team too, like I said, this team's sat 19th global at the moment. Pretty sure it's 19th, could be wrong, but you can go have a look on the global rankings and see me there yourself if you wish, because I can't be bothered to check. But yeah, for this team, again, I'm probably just going to cut Bortoletto, and that leaves me with a nice, comfortable 8.1 to jump up to a Behrman. I'm probably just going to sit with that. I'm just going to sit with Lawson because this team, I've kind of accepted my budget is a bit rubbish, so I'm just going to not focus too much on it. Like I take a Bearman where I can to get a nice little price rise over someone like a Bortoletta, so it's going to drop. It nets me like $1 million or whatever. But I'm not going to lose sleep over the budget for this team. I'm just really focusing in on points, and have done for pretty much the whole season, which is why, at the beginning of the season after Australia, where this team had, I think I actually only had one DNF from Australia, which is probably also why it did really well. It's doing really well. Basically, I haven't really bothered to change my team too much. I think I left in someone like a Hajar after his DNF in Australia because I thought he was good for points anyway, and I just accepted he was going to get his budget sliced, and I took those budget hits, and that's what's got me the points on the board at the moment. Again, it's probably going to bite me in a few races' time, and I'll start slipping down the leaderboard. But for the time being, I'm just trying to power out the points, and this team too is probably what I'm going to end up with. Hulkenberg and Alonso looking decent in terms of points and budget gain. Bearman the same. Lawson just sit there as a cushion here and hopefully get me some points. Just avoid DNFing and hope that the McLarens and the Ferraris can just haul in the points. It's kind of where I'm going with my team too. So yeah, in terms of other chips, would I use any other chips? There's been some chit chat about autopilot. I have thought about autopilot as well. I would only really use autopilot for two reasons. One, if I was going for the, if we just cut this down a bit. One, can I really not afford like Lando Norris if I cut everyone else? Of course I can't. I'm being so stupid. Right, one reason why I'd autopilot is if I went for the triple McLaren build. But if you're going to triple McLaren build, you probably just want to go 3 times. But then if you're worried about the rain, maybe you want to go triple McLaren, but you don't want to 3 times because of the rain. Maybe you want to autopilot instead. So it kind of a safety belt. If Piastri was to crash out, or vice, if you pick Norris to do 2 times, then autopilot will protect you against that. So autopilot could protect you this weekend if you want to go down that way. But if you're going to the trouble of using the triple up on McLaren, then you probably just want to 3 times and take the risk with the rain, to be honest. The other reason why you might autopilot is if you've gone with like the double A-tier constructor. So if you can afford to pack in a bunch of cheapy drivers down here. I can't quite get there 3.7. I'm very, very close. So next week or two, I'm hoping I'll be able to get to this. Some people will already be able to afford it. If you can, don't hate it. Don't love it this weekend. I think I'm going to definitely wait. Even if I could afford it, I think I'd probably just wait for another weekend. I could definitely afford it with like an Antonelli or something quite comfortably. But yeah, I'm not going to go down that road. But if you are going down this road and you want to go with the double A, although Antonelli's not technically an A tier at the moment, he's a B tier, but still, if you want to go down this road, autopilot could be a fine option, particularly if Antonelli starting at the back. Maybe gets a bunch of overtakes and positions gained and even outscores Piastri on the sprint, and then maybe Piastri just crashes out in the rain on Sunday and Antonelli swoops through as the autopilot star. Who knows? But yeah, I personally am not going to go down autopilot. No negative, already used it, but at the same time, if you have no negative, I think it looks like it's a fine option. Looks like a fine option. The reason I used it in Miami was because it was pouring with rain ahead of the sprint, and it looks like there's going to be some rain affected during the Grand Prix. So again, sprint weekend, double the chance of DNFing, big old minus 20s. Yeah, I think no negative is fine. If you've got it, I would not be at all worried about using it this weekend. In fact, if I had no negative, I'd be strongly considering using it. I don't have no negative in either of my Team 1 or my Team 2. They both used it back in Miami. So, yeah, it's not really a concern for me. But, yeah, otherwise, don't think there's really much else in terms of chips. Limitless, maybe. Again, I've used my Limitless back in Monaco, so I don't have to worry about that. I personally wouldn't be using Limitless this weekend again because of the threat of rain. As well as it doesn't look to me like there's a clear top 5. You could argue Piastri, Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc, but then who else are you putting in there? Probably a George Russell. I assume he's going to make some positions gained and do better on Sunday, maybe, but it's not clear like it was back in Monaco, so I'd probably wait, maybe even Hungary on a low overtake track where you can get that better delta. So yeah, in terms of chips, that's kind of where I'm standing at the moment. I'm probably not using any chips myself. Probably keeping things simple, just switching around my drivers. Probably just going to do like a Stroll and a Bearman, which is pretty boring. I do like Ocon, but it looks like he's probably getting the chop. So yeah, let's just throw it on one more time for the end of the video. Just going to go like boom, boom. Sort this properly. Bring in Strolly Boy, not that he inspires confidence, and Bearman. Use up every penny of the budget. And run with a team like this. Again, keep my third transfer intact for the following race in Budapest. So yeah. That's what my thinking is. Thanks for listening to me on this Friday, or maybe Saturday if you've caught it ahead of the deadline on deadline day. So yeah, thanks for listening. And I'll catch you again soon for some more F1 Fantasy coverage. Thanks and bye.